Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. And sorry it's been a week or more. It's been a little over a week, but I'm building the Airfix Cromwell tank at the moment. I'm going to do a diorama for it, I think, and it's slow progress. And so I thought I'd just do something different this weekend. Just do a quick kind of diorama that it wasn't really planned. I had some figures that I'd bought in August, and I still have some boxes of figures that I suppose they're just for quicker dioramas that don't involve a vehicle. And some of the figures that I had were, as you'll see, the Master Box number 35158, British and German soldiers from the Battle of the Somme. And it's only about £5 in the UK. So the idea was, as you've seen in so many pictures, probably photographs, soldiers walking on the surface between trenches, whether it's behind the lines or after a battle. There's 4 German figures and 2 British soldiers guarding the prisoners. Lovely little set of figures. Not super easy to build, but nice detail. Just didn't go together very well in some ways. So I just had a cabinet that had been delivered at work, and they had these thick doorstep kind of pieces of polystyrene. They're about I think just under 2 inches thick, and you can see the size of it there. I have trimmed it a little bit, as you saw, just to fit the actual board that I'm building it on. And what I really wanted to do, because I had some matchsticks and I had some coffee stirrers, some little wooden coffee stirrers about half the width of a lollipop stick and thinner than a lollipop stick, and they snap easily to a rough edge, but they also cut with sprue snips. They cut to a smart straight edge as well. So the plan for this was just to use the plaster for mud and do some duck boards, which were the straight lengths of walkway that the soldiers put down over muddy areas, both in the trench and between the trenches on no man's land. And I wanted a couple of soggy kind of shell holes as well, and a little strip of trench, but the actual figures to be on the ground level, on the surface, and to be walking through kind of battered landscape. So this is the 3rd trench diorama that I've done, and if you look back a few weeks, you'll see a few videos. You'll see another one that I made with the ruins of a building. But the first one that I made, I have included in videos, 2 videos. But it was something I built before I was doing YouTube videos, so I've just shown the finished article. But I think trenches are super simple to do, and there's like so many different configurations, so many different designs you can do. Just browse photographs from the period, and you'll see they're quite a varied set of designs. It's unfortunate really that the vehicles from the First World War that are made by Tamiya and Meng, and there's a few, but they always seem to be quite expensive. Else I'd have loved to have put a Mark IV tank on this, but they are expensive, and there's some lovely British Army tank driver kits, and officers standing around chatting with tank drivers. There's some lovely figures. So there's an easy diorama out there if you've got the money to splurge on a Tamiya's Mark IV tank, and that's one of the ones that have got the electric batteries in, and you can wire it up so that it drives by itself. I don't think it's remote control. I think it's just an on-off switch, and you let it go. But it's got the workings inside. It's why it's expensive. I don't think I'd be interested in doing that. So I wish Tamiya just released a version without all the wiring in, like a simplified version. So you can see there the coffee stirrers, coffee suppliers and Amazon and stuff will sell them. I think they're 1,000 for £5. But and the matchsticks were from like a discount store, like B&M Bargains, and they were I think a big bag for £1.99 or £1.50, and they are going to be the tools that I'm going to make the side of the trenches with, and also the duck board. So you can see I'm just dipping the little planks that are not uniform. They're not uniform lengths. I've just snapped them so they're realistic, look like pieces of wood, and just PVA gluing them to 2 runners, 2 matchsticks underneath. So it's quite a wet mix, guys. In terms of plaster, it's got my normal coffee grains in it that I usually add, just for the sake of a little bit of colour and texture to it. So I just use the leftover spent coffee out of a cafetiere, just when I'm needing liquid to start my plaster off. And it's just plaster of Paris, casting plaster. So I'm trying to do an obvious path through the middle of this landscape, and bank up some earth on either side, just as it's a kind of supply route into the trenches behind the lines. And I always struggle with what tool to use when it comes to mixing plaster and putting the plaster on the surface, but this was just a big thick paintbrush, artist's oil paintbrush probably, with quite sturdy bristles, and it worked really well actually, and it allowed me to add a tiny bit of water into the plaster mix at the end, and sort of paint it on to the sides of the polystyrene, which just makes it easier when you come to painting the sides of the polystyrene. I do have some balsa wood, and I could have put banked up the side with a kind of wood finish, as people do on YouTube, but it just seems a bit excessive to me, unless I know that I'm going to display it or sell it. It seems a bit unnecessary to me, so I usually paint the sides of a diorama with just the same mud colour as the surface. But you can see it's a nice thick slab of polystyrene. The subsequent diorama is super light, and cost next to nothing really, and was quick to build. Built, painted, and the figures put on it, I think, on Saturday and Sunday this week. So it shows you don't need loads of time. And like I say, if I'd had a big First World War tank to plop in the middle of this, then it would have looked really good. But as it is, it's even cheaper because I'm just putting a few figures on it. So I made the duck boards, but I'm also using the same snapped little planks of wood to be the base of the trench. If I'd have done the trench wider, I could have done a wall of sandbags, because I had some air drying clay. As it is, I put a couple of token ones on. It's not very good, but they would have added a lot of weight to it as well. But I would have liked to have done a whole area of sandbags, and but I left the trench. The actual trench was too narrow, so I just didn't allow for it. Another little tip is if you've created a trench and there's a side of it or a surface that you're not happy with, maybe the polystyrene's visible, maybe the plaster was too thin, or whatever it is, the knife cuts are visible, you can either use air drying clay to make a sandbag reinforcement, or you can use, like I have, the small thin coffee stirrers or matchsticks to make planks of wood. But also, if you look at the photographs, there's areas where they've just put a tarp across the side, so they're not brushing and getting covered in mud all the time. There's just a tarpaulin or a fabric sheet that's been thrown over the side of the trench. Obviously that's not structural, it's not retaining anything, but it's just making it so that they can lean on the against the side of the trench. I think for that I've used wet wipes in the past that have dried, and I've used thin actual cotton, but I think probably the most easy to maneuver with and manipulate is tin foil, aluminium foil, because you can put creases in it. It's easy to shape, and it's easy to paint as well. So yeah, if you're building a trench that's not going your way, then consider just draping over a square of aluminium foil, putting some creases in it, and then painting it khaki. I always like to break the kind of flatness of a diorama by putting some element, whether it be a building or a tree, putting some element that kind of stands up. So I've got 3 little twigs just found in the park, which 3 or 4 little twigs, which just break up the flatness of this landscape. I did have some wet plaster, because I'd used such a wet mix of plaster. I did have some parts of the diorama which weren't dry after I'd glued in and cemented in some of the wooden boards, so it was easy to make a mud effect back over some of the boards, and just make a continuity of plaster with the coffee grains in as the surface, and also overlapping some of the boards to show where mud may have flowed or where men's boots had trodden it. So I was pleased really that I was working on the plaster as it was still damp, and I could move it around with the brush and water it down a little bit where I needed it to run, and especially between the boards and in the trench. So I've added a few sandbags out of the air drying clay. You see them in the distance to the terracotta colour. I think a really good mud colour is just a little bit of black and yellow ochre. It makes this browny grey, and I don't like to use, as I've said before, I don't like to use expensive Vallejo model paints for dioramas. I just use acrylic, artists' acrylics that I've bought cheaply from the art shops. So it's easy painting a diorama like this because you've got different tones of wood, you've got different coloured sandbags, and you've got different coloured areas of the ground where things have been blown up, or where the ground has been dug into, so there's different kinds of sandy colours or chalky colours in the earth that have been brought to the surface. But I always think that if you overlap a little bit and go a bit and kind of if you use one colour as a base and it kind of saturates the diorama, then I think there's some realism to that, because the mud, the main general mud colour, would coat everything around it. So I am untidy painting when I'm painting these things, and I kind of use that excuse that the mud would have coated everything around it but still I try and pick out in other colours the things that I'd like to highlight as slightly different. So I have even used some of the mud tone up to about waist height on the tree stumps, and I've gone over the boards with the mud tone as well, but then I've lightened it a little bit with some highlights. Oh, we could see there how I created that little coil of barbed wire. It's probably not the best way of doing it. I'm sure the best way of doing it is buying some expensive kit, but I just cut from a sheet of wire mesh. I just cut individual strands of wire, and because you're cutting it from mesh, there are adjoining connections, there's junctions I think on this one it was every 8mm or something like that. So if you're cutting across the whole sheet, then I think the connections, the junctions are a right angle to the wire, and they're 4mm long if you cut down the middle of an 8x8 mesh. So it's worth perhaps going along and trimming the barbs back a little bit, because 4mm is too long. I've done it on some while this video footage was made, but I've since gone back and kind of shortened the length of some of the barbs, if you know what I mean. And I'm sure at that scale, just using wire without any barbs on is probably more realistic, because would you see the details on a piece of barbed wire at this scale? I'm not sure, but at least you can tell what it is. And I just painted it rust coloured, and I used matchsticks that were stuck into the plaster whilst it was still wet, and then I wrapped I tangled the wire around things so that I didn't glue it onto the base. I've just tangled the wire around the sturdy matchsticks that were stuck in. So you see here, guys, the kit: 2 British sentries, 2 British guards, and a German prisoner of war who's just walking along, and then 2 German prisoners of war carrying an injured colleague between them. That was quite difficult to put together. That's the only thing about the kit, because you've got to be able to place the carrying men's feet on the surface, so they've got to be in line with each other. They've got to be the same height, and touch the ground at the same point, so that they're stable and not rocking to one side to another. Then your next problem is that they've both got their hand behind the guy that they're carrying, and then they've got their other hand on his leg. Masterbox have cast their hands on the man's leg, so that you have to stick the wrist of the carrying men to the leg, and it all has to line up with his arms around their neck. It was quite difficult, because there's 3 or 4 points where everything has to perfectly connect, and I'll be honest, I've not done it perfect, but I tried to get it as realistic as could be. But there you go, guys, more or less finished. I have put a little bit more of the still water effect in the trench holes after this. I've put a Lewis gun on the sandbags and a little sign saying "keep down," and some Lewis ammunition magazines. But yeah, pleased with the colours, pleased with the coffee stirrers, the mud effect. You can see the barbed wire in more detail there. I've clipped it a little bit, trimmed them down a little bit, and really happy with the figures. So let me know what you think, guys, and please click like and subscribe if you want to see more model builds and dioramas like this, and check out my Instagram, which is also Supermodel Dave. Cheers, guys.